These are called bud vases or weed pots. We're going to do a rough shape. I'm going to show you how to do that. And then using what you've learned, the beads and coves, we're going to go ahead and make the shape of a vase. In addition to that, we're going to teach you how to measure properly and how to drill a hole to the proper depth and diameter. And then using a different tool, a scraper, we're going to show you how to go ahead and form the opening. And then using parting tools, we're going to part off or cut off the end, the bottom, and then you have a finished piece. Most of the spindle work that you do will be between centers, using a live center and a drive center. So the first thing we're going to do is mount the chuck. The most common size chuck that you use is a 50 millimeter. We have them here at 25, 50, 75, and 100 millimeter. But the most versatile is 50 millimeter. You want to hold your piece should be round so that it fits in the jaw so that you have the best holding power. But in addition to that, you can hold a square piece. The pieces should be as square as possible. You don't want to try and hold a rectangular piece because you don't get as good a gripping power. So we begin by placing the corners of the square in between the openings of the jaws. And then we bring the tailstock up, put it on center, and just snug it up. Doesn't have to be super tight. And what we want to do here is we want to bottom out the bottom of our workpiece to the face of the chuck, the inside face of the chuck. And then we go ahead and tighten it down. Now the main disadvantage of this type of grip is that you're only contacting the points of the chuck, which doesn't give you the best grip possible. And when you do this, if the wood is hard enough, or even softer woods, you can splinter them out and then you have less holding power. So it's not the best technique, but it is one that you can use if need be. So once we get it good and tight, position the tool rest. We want the tool rest fairly close, about 3/8 of an inch away, and high enough so that our tool, again, is cutting at center or slightly above. That looks pretty good. The next thing you want to do is make sure the speed is turned down to 0 and turn the piece by hand. Make sure it clears the tool rest, not binding, hitting anything. We're good to go. Turn the switch on and turn the speed up. All I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly round the piece off. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting it nice and smooth because once I get it round, I'm going to use other tools, use a spindle gouge to smooth it out and to do what I have to do. First of all, I want to round it off. All right, that's round. The next step is to go ahead and get a rough shape of a vase. It doesn't have to be exact, but what I want to do here is I want to start by just defining the upper edge. I'm going to do a half a cove. Cut a cove in here. And come back the other way. You have to come in here and you turn your wrist. And see what happens when you turn your wrist and you push slightly forward, you cut it out instead of pulling. Now watch this. So you want to turn and push slightly forward and stay, that bevel is up against the wood. So as I come around, I'm going to turn my hand. Watch, I'm turning my wrist and my hand to maintain that bevel up against the wood. Okay, now to get more of a curvature in here, I have to change my angle. And nice and right around. Follow the tool around to keep it on the bevel. Pushing slightly forward. And rotating my wrist. All right, next thing I want to do is define where my bottom's going to be. I don't want to make this too long, so it'll be about here. And I'll start that with a half a bead. Very shallow half a bead. And I'm going to stop there. That's good enough. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to determine what size hole we want to drill. So there's several ways you can do it. One of the easiest ways is just take an outside caliper and go ahead and measure this diameter at the narrowest point, okay? Then you can, using a rule, you can go ahead and get your measurement. That diameter is 1.25 inches. So I can safely drill a 1-inch hole. The other way you can measure it was with the vernier calipers. Does the same thing. I still get the same measurement. So I've determined that I want to use a 1-inch bit. The other thing we want to do is determine how deep we want to drill this. Because I have plenty of extra stock, but I cut it to this length. So I want to measure, and I get just about 4.5 inches to the bottom. So I don't want to go any further than about 4.25 inches with my bit. Okay, so the next thing to do is to get our drill bit set up to drill our holes. Now, one of the advantages of a lathe is you can use interchangeable, what they call Morse tapered bits. And we're talking about this taper here on the drive side of the bit or the holder. This is an adapter. This is a 1-inch diameter. It's a twist bit. It's number 3 Morse taper. But this is number 2 Morse taper. So I need an adapter to go ahead and convert to a 3 to 2. There is a flat ground in the bottom to match this tang, okay? And when these go together, they go in with a twist. Now, that's locked in. The next step then is to insert this in the tailstock. Oop. Bring the quill up till it engages fully, and then this is good to go. Next thing we want to do is we want to measure our drill bit so that we don't drill in too far. We know we want to go 4.25 inches deep. So there's several ways you can do this. You can take your tape measure, 4.25, and you could put a mark on with a magic mark or a pencil or what have you, and that works pretty good. The other way to do it is to take a little bit of masking tape. You can take your masking tape, lay it in here at 4.25 inches, wrap it around, and then when you get to the tape, you're at your depth. So the next thing we want to do is go ahead and bring this up to center, lock the tailstock, make sure the quill lock is loose, turn our speed down, and when you begin to cut, you want to kind of just study this in case there's any wobble at the very beginning until you just turn the wheel and start your cut, okay? Now once you feel this is being steady, you can go ahead and let go and just continue. You get that squeak. A lot of times you'll hear it squeaking like crazy. You get a little bit of wax, beeswax or the wax that we use for finishing. What we do is we put it on the drill bit, okay, when it's nice and warm. It lubricates it and you don't get that squeak. Okay, nice and quiet. Just a little tip. All right about there, that's 4.25. I'm done. Now the other way to release it, you can release the tailstock, hold on to this and pull it straight back. Before I release this from the quill, what I want to do while it's still in the lathe is I want to separate the drill from the adapter. You need what is known as a drift. These are called a drift, and they are inserted in the slot right behind the back tang of the drill bit and the adapter. And all you do is give it a little tap. That frees it up. Catch that so it doesn't fall, and then you can pull your bit right out. And then the next thing you want to do is you want to release the adapter. So we just continue turning back until we feel the inside shaft contact the back of the adapter. Just give it a little tap and it comes right out. Okay, the next step is to define the front of the vase. So first we want to do is position our tool rest. We want to get the tool rest over in front of the mouth and lock it in. First thing we want to do is line it up. Now, we want the scraper cutting edge to be right at center or slightly above. A scraper cuts with a burr that is turned up on the edge of the tool. So it's a very fine burr that you raise on the edge of the tool. What I want to do is, before I start, I want to make sure that I'm at center, and unlike the gouges where we teach the handle should be low, on a scraper you want that handle horizontal or just slightly above. So what I'm going to do here, using the scraper, I'm going to cut away this end grain and just shape this outside. I'm going to tilt it up slightly so I have more of the burr in contact with the workpiece. And on this I can go in either direction. So now all I'm going to do is widen this out a little bit and just gradually taper it right into the vase. With this half-round scraper is ideal for this because I can cut on that radius, the entire radius of the scraper, and get a nice smooth transition. Nice light cuts. A lot of beginners make a mistake and they think that they have to push everything in and take heavy cuts. Nope. Nice, light, gentle cuts, and we've got a nice shape to the mouth of the vase. Whenever possible, you should have your tailstock or your live center in contact with your workpiece as much as possible. All right, so we want to insert this in the quill, make sure that it's seated, and then bring it on up. And this is one of the advantages to this pyramid type live center, in that you'll fit right in here and you won't damage your workpiece, and it will fit in there nice and snugly and give you the support you need while you're working on the rest of the project. So I'm going to adjust the tool rest and we're good to go. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to take my spindle gouge and just clean this up, all right? Make it look just a little bit better. Being careful not to go too deep because I don't want to go and make a funnel. I can finish this bottom a little bit. Okay. All right, our piece is fairly smooth. If you use your tools properly and get a nice smooth finish, then all you need to do with the sandpaper is remove the tool marks. If, however, you have a rough finish, if you didn't do that well with your spindle gouge, then you may have to go to a coarser grit and work your way up. The one thing you have to be careful with is, because this piece is turning and you're sanding cross grain, you have to be careful of scratches. In that case, you would have to sand with the grain instead of across the grain. You have to turn the machine off and just sand the marks out with the grain. One of the mistakes a lot of beginners make is they go to a finer grit too soon and they leave scratch marks or rough areas behind, and they keep sanding with the fine sandpaper. If you see that, you have to go back, go to a coarser grain and get those scratch marks or those blemishes out before you go to the finer grain. Another common mistake with beginners is they feel that the faster that the piece is turning, the better they're sanding. That's a misnomer. If you're turning the piece too fast, you end up burnishing the piece and not sanding it. So I like to keep my speed down around 600 or 700 RPM for sanding. Another handy little tool is the little scrubbies. These back up your sandpaper and keep you from burning your fingers. Plus, they're easily formed into just about any kind of shape you want in order to follow your contours of your workpiece, okay? You go ahead and apply the sandpaper, lower portion of your piece, and get all surfaces. And this is 220. That should be more than enough. And then inspect your piece, make sure the scratches are all gone. And again, if necessary, you want to sand with the grain, but this came out very well. And the next thing you want to do, you want to sand the inner portion of your workpiece. This piece, I have glued a piece of sandpaper on it. This is 320 grit, and this is fine. The problem with this is when you wear out the sandpaper, you've got to get it off and then replace it, re-glue it. Another way to do this is to take a proper size dowel and cut a kerf in it. And then you can go ahead and take your sandpaper and just go ahead and slip it into the kerf. Wrap it around the dowel, and then you have to hold it in position with your fingers. And then just insert it into your workpiece, and you can use this to go ahead and smooth out the inside. You can use it to do the mouth and work it back and forth. What I found on pieces like this, I like to use aniline dye. It doesn't obliterate the grain as much as stain does, and it lets the grain show through, and you get a nice coloring. All right. So we have a variety of dyes, anything from antique cherry red to a violet. We've got blue. We have yellow, orange. So you take your choice. The first thing you want to do is protect the lathe. This can get sloppy. One of the things I like about aniline dye is I mix it fairly strong, but if I want a lighter color, a lighter shade of it, all I have to do is add water to it, and I can make it as light as I want. To darken it, I just add subsequent coats. So I pour a little out in my dish, and I don't turn the lathe on for this, I just turn the piece by hand, and using a sponge brush, apply the dye liberally. Now, most open grain woods, when you apply any kind of finish or any kind of stain or dye, it has a tendency, or it will, raise the grain. And then make sure you get the entire inside coated up really good. And then we're quickly going to dry this. Okay, now the piece is nice and dry, but like a lot of the wood grains, especially the softer grains, when you put anything that's liquid on it, the finish, you will raise the grain. Now, one of the tricks to finishing is you might want to take with a damp cloth, wipe it down. You'll raise the grain, re-sand it nice and smooth, and then you're ready to go with your finish, okay? So again, very lightly, just get the fuzzies off. That's all it takes. That should do it. Then I'm going to apply the second coat. Again, liberally. There's one more thing to do with this piece, and that's to go ahead and cut it off. Our last cut was with the 1/4-inch parting tool. All right, we took and cut a nice flat straight area on the bottom, about 1/4 or so of an inch or so in. Now, instead of coming straight in, I'm going to put the tool on a very slight angle, and what that's going to do is that's going to cause the piece to be slightly concave, so that You don't want to make it convex. You don't want to come off on this angle, but you want to get a little concave so that when you set it on the table, it doesn't weeble wobble. It sits nice and flat. And to do that, I'm just going to come in here and again on a slight angle and start parting it off. Take a couple of cuts wide so I can get in there with my tool easily. And just come right in. Take your hand, be careful of the chuck, and just cradle that so you can hold it steady while you part it off the rest of the way. There it is. There's a little nub in the bottom, and just clean this little nub off here. Apply a little dye to the bottom, get it all nice and even, and it's complete. Okay, that's it for this week. Next week we're going to be making ball toss games. We'll use a little bit different procedure for holding and for drilling. Until then, happy turning.